And then I'm introducing you. You're going to stand up here while I introduce you? Okay. Wrote a page, but I'll be quicker. I know, I'm sorry. And then I know I'm not going to be able to read my handwriting. Hello, can you hear me? Oh, yeah. All right, so thanks everybody for coming to this special grand rounds. I see the new residents are here. Yeah, can you guys raise your hands? All right, yeah. That's awesome. First day, second day? Not yet, first day? I don't know. All right, we're not counting. So this is a really special grand rounds today. Thank you for coming. Thanks for finding the L. Connors Learning Laboratory here. The room has recently been renamed after that gentleman right there. I specifically wanted to avoid Scott Auditorium, and I know that caused some consternation and controversy, but thank you for bearing with us. So before I introduce our speaker, I do want to thank our 2017-2018 coaches. So some of them are here today: Atsuko Yamahiro, Maria Antonelli, Todd Saul, Jim Pyle, and Bob Smith. You will understand what that means shortly, I promise. And our future coaches: Michelle Niemer is here, Hugo Pazimar is here. I don't think Kaylin or Shireen are here, but they're also our future coaches. So with that out of the way, Carrie Palamara is an assistant professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School. Up until recently, she was an APD of the residency program and the director of the primary care track there. She is now the inaugural director of the Center of Physician Wellbeing for the Department of Medicine at MGH. She created, directs, participates in the professional development coaching program for the internal medicine residency coaching program at MGH, and has now helped this program spread to over 40 programs throughout the country, ours included. So no small feat. And she's been so generous with her time and sharing her knowledge, so much so that she replied all to an email listserv, our Aptim email listserv, and I responded to her. I was one of, it sounds like 50 people who responded to this email, and that ended up with us on the phone, and she started coaching me, and then all of a sudden she was coming here for grand rounds on her way out from a training at UH. So thank you so much, Carrie, for being here, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you. I don't know, I feel like it's like a glutton for punishment, but you'll see with these coaching conversations, they become very infectious, and you just can't stop. In fact, we were joking. Often my husband will look at me and be like, "I know what you're doing right now, but I'll let you do it anyway." We're going to very, very briefly touch upon burnout. I think like one slide worth. And then start a conversation about what's on the other side of that. And what are some solutions that we in particular at Mass General have done, particularly focusing on residents and their well-being by way of coaching, but also thinking about what really is that picture of physician well-being, and how once we understand that, can we start to do anything about that. Before I dive in, I have to be sure to acknowledge the Institute of Coaching, and particularly Dr. Carol Kaufman, who helped us to design the curriculum and onboard in our early years, and then our grant funders who helped us to evaluate the program. I received no money from them. Their money funds our research, but in particular the Macy Foundation, the Arthur Viney Davis Foundation, and most recently the Physicians Foundation. So to dive in, has anybody seen this picture before? If you've seen this before. Okay. So this picture is from Kate Shanafelt and colleagues when he was at Mayo, and they published this in the Mayo Clinic Proceedings. They did a research study of tens of thousands of doctors around the country through the AMA listserv, and they asked doctors about how burned out they are and how satisfied with their work-life balance that they are. Now, I'd like to point out a few things about this graph. So here on the x-axis is the percent burnt out, and I would just like to say that this is not 0. This is 35%. So that's our baseline. And this is 75%. And then when we look at the y-axis, satisfied with work-life balance, at the bottom here is 15%, and at the top is 60%. So at best, you are 60% satisfied with your work-life balance and only 35% burnt out. And so What they then do is layer in specialties on top of this graph. And you'll see here in this red hot abscess area is general internal medicine, which is what I practice. I'm a primary care doctor. And then general internal medicine subspecialty is slightly better in the 50% range. And I actually showed this graph to our interns last year, and one of them raised his hand and said, so you're telling me that there's a greater than 50% chance I'm going to be burnt out. Why is that okay, and why aren't you doing anything about it? And I was like, what do you think I'm doing? and so the idea, though, is that it's almost like a sentence looking at this. Like, you are going to experience burnout. You are going to have trouble with work-life balance. And that is not like what you signed up for on match day. And so how can we think about changing this so that it isn't a sentence anymore and that you have a chance of winding up in this better green area? And the idea is that trying to get to well-being isn't just to make happy doctors, but to really think, well, we have that right level of stress, that right level of support, we really thrive. We're like in the zone, our work feels effortless, the time could fly by and we wouldn't even notice it. But unfortunately, when we're not, that's when you start to see fatigue set in. That one's pretty obvious. But then you start to see people calling out sick more often, people more susceptible to cold, people more susceptible to getting sicker from just the routine or injuries. And you start to even see the signs of burnout and the consequences of mental health. Now, if any of you find yourself in this zone, please let me know, and then I'll come here and do residency again. But I don't think that this will really happen to any of us. But really the idea is to get here, to the center of this curve, with the right amount of stress, so we're really motivated by it, not overwhelmed by it. And so let's think now about what are the drivers to get us there, to the center of that curve. And so we want to first think about, so the same group from Mayo, they tried to break it down. You're not supposed to necessarily be able to see everything that's in this. It's more for the sake of, I'll say to you what the words are. But they basically said, what are the drivers of burnout? And then if we flip that around, are those the same things that drive well-being? And then thought about how can we really break this down into some sort of construct? Because once we have a construct, we can then think about how to act upon it. And so what they came up with is right at the center of everything is meaning and work. And I actually think that's very symbolic of that's in the center. And then around the outside, you have workload and job demands, control and flexibility, work-life integration, social support and community at work, organizational culture and values, and efficiency and resources. Now, when these are going well, meaning at work can really thrive, and that center can really expand. When these things aren't going well, that's when you really lose that meaning at work, when it contracts around that, and all of that gets squeezed out of it. And now think about the life of a resident. Workload and job demands, not small. Control and flexibility, not a lot of that either. Work-life integration, most of you might not be so sure what that even means. Social support and community at work, that's usually a good one. That's usually pretty strong for residents. Organizational culture and values within the residency program can be quite strong. How that fits into the whole spectrum of everything can be very confusing, actually. Efficiency and resources, that's typically you. You are the efficiency as a resident. And so it's no surprise that residents struggle. And thinking about how can we start to layer in to some of this construct to think about how we can connect people with what gives them meaning in work, which gives them joy, what gives them purpose, how they can see themselves within the organizational structure and connect with that. And start to think about what makes you most efficient. How do you ask for resources and for help? And how do you process the workload and job demands that you can have any sort of work-life integration? And so this is the construct that we're going to be thinking about as we dive in a little bit further. And so this idea of like, what is well-being? If you try to look into this, there's all different definitions about what it is, but it's certainly not lack of burnout. There's something more to it. There's something more behind this curtain of what this is. And part of it is joy and practice, really being connected to why you do what you do, what gives you meaning, what gives you purpose. Thinking about fulfillment. So you may love what you do, but actually getting to actualize that in the workplace. Really being connected with the values of your leadership. Really understanding how you fit into that whole structure. So that you have a lot of that self-worth, that self-efficacy is actually realized. And then what are the drivers of that? Appreciation. Typically like decently high for residents. A lot of people think people working so hard. Peer support, typically pretty good. This is where it starts to drop off a little bit. Alignment of goals and values. When you're like faxing outside hospital records at midnight, that may be something that is feeling a little bit off. Schedule control. Efficiency of practice. workload, autonomy. We try to work on these things. But when you can name something and when you can bucket it, that's when you can start to think, okay, how can I make this better? How can I change this? But you can see how when these things are going well, our well-being can be very high. So this is the life that we're living. When these things are struggling, that's where you start to see the well-being being threatened. And so engagement is often brought up as part of what is well-being. When someone has joy in practice and professional fulfillment, they're typically very engaged in their work. And what that is a positive, fulfilling, work-related state of mind with vigor, dedication, and absorption. It sounds like, a physician charging on the hall, ready to go, whatever they're doing. But a lot of this comes down to your relationship between you and the institution and the people that you work for and their values and how that's all aligned. And when this is high, when your physician engagement is high, you have lower patient turnover, you have better patient outcomes, you actually order fewer tests, you make fewer mistakes. And so there is a reason to really focus on this. It's more than just happy doctors. It's how do happy doctors function? And they function well, and their patients are happier. And that ends up working out better for everyone. And this is such an important part now of how physicians are going to be paid, that we need to start thinking about this early on so that as an institution, we can start to think about, our cost contracts or other things. How can we maximize the patient engagement, the physician engagement, and really recognize that they are a valuable resource and not just the cog in the wheel. And so coaching has been one area where we have focused a lot. And the idea is that initially one might think, when you think about different types of initiatives that you can do, people often talk about fix the system, fix the institution, and you can fix the people. Work on big system issues, work on department leadership and individual leadership, and then help the people. Now, to help the people stuff, you should appropriately be eye-rolling and thinking about, none of you would be in this room if you weren't resilient. None of you would be in this room if you didn't have grit. You wouldn't have made it this far. But the idea is that the system has pushed upon us pretty hard. And so some of us do need to be reconnected with what makes us our most resilient or our best selves. But the other idea is that when you use people within the institution to do the coaching, what happens is I don't just coach the people I'm assigned to coach. As Dave says, I'm going to coach anyone you put me in front of. I'm going to coach every learner. I'm going to coach every patient. I'm going to coach all my mentees. I'm going to coach I'm going to coach us. And so it starts to create a culture of support where people feel those values coming through. When you can walk up to someone and say, what really matters to you? How can we make that happen here? And they know what to say back. When you think about what can leadership say, having a voice to respond when someone says what matters to you, what would give you joy in your work. If you know the answer to that, you become much more powerful in advocating for yourself and for other people that you work with. But I'll tell you, a lot of us don't know the answer to that question. Or at least we don't have it right on the tip of our tongue for that elevator pitch. So what is coaching? So the idea of coaching that we use, the definition of coaching, and I'll tell you, this is actually, the definitions are important. The Tool Guande wrote an article about coaching about 9 years ago when we were first getting started. And I was so excited because I had just pitched this idea of a coaching program to our own residency. And I emailed it to Guande because he works for partners, I work for partners. I can just type in a Tool Guande and it'll go right to his email. And so I was like, this is so great. We're literally on the same page. And, I read your work. I love this. I know you're very busy. I don't care how long it takes. I would love to be able to talk to you. And within 30 seconds, he replies to me. And it wasn't an out of office. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, he is interested in this. And so I opened it up. I even remember where I was sitting when I did this. I opened it up, and he said, I think you're on the wrong track. Residents don't need help. It's the faculty who do. Focus on the faculty instead. And I was like, ouch. But then I realized he read his article, and I was like, actually, we're not talking about the same thing. He was talking about this very performance coaching, and I'm going to tell you what to do. Put your arm that way, and position your body this way. He'll be faster, and he'll be smoother and streamlined. And I was talking about what gives you meaning in your work, and what makes you get out of bed in the morning, and how can we make sure you have more time for that, and how do you process that really bad nursing interaction that you just had last week that you don't feel like you have anyone to talk to about? And what do you do when you get blasted on your evaluation and you don't know what to think through that with? So I was like, we're totally on a different page. I need to get back to definition. And so the definition of coaching that we use comes from the literal definition of a stagecoach, a vehicle that picks the person up from where they are, as defined by them, to where they want to be, as defined by them. And you as a coach are simply the space for that journey. And you help get them to where they want to be by listening, by reflecting, and by helping to ask the powerful questions to help them understand things deeper. As doctors, we ask a lot of questions to help us understand things deeper. But as a coach, we have to really think about putting our curiosity outward and helping them explore their experiences in new ways to give people new perspectives and recognizing how they can actually move towards that future that they're envisioning. And the idea is that you're not fixing anybody, but you're really helping people be their best selves. You're really helping to unwind all the stuff that's up in there and getting it out so that it's real, so that someone else has heard it, and then you can do something about it. And so this is the definition of coaching that we use, and then layer in a curriculum around that, which I'll share with you. A lot of it starts with just simply unpacking the positive. What's working well for us? What makes us feel good? What have we done well that we're proud of? Because so many of us will walk through our days and have lots of positive experiences and never give ourselves the credit for it. And it's not just about the pat on the back, but it's about recognizing you have strengths, you have value, you bring this to the table. When you know that, they become tools, they become opportunities. And actually, when we share positive stories, we become more mentally flexible, more creative, and more open to new ideas. And so we start all of our coaching meetings, and actually, I try to start all my interactions in general with sharing positive stories. And it's not that the negative shouldn't stick to you. It's not that you should just let the negative slide off. But if all you do is hold on to the negative, you're not actually as efficient or as capable or as creative as you could be. And they actually have studied this in businesses and in teams to see the number of positive comments and negative comments. And a ratio of about 5 to 1 seems to be the right amount. 5 positive comments for every 1 negative comment. And that's way far from the feedback sandwich, if you're figuring that. And so the best relationships are cultivated by recognizing the strengths and the values that we each bring to the table. But if left to our own devices, we don't do this very well. And so what I want to do right now, actually, is give you guys a chance to appreciate this for yourself. No role playing, I promise. So what I'm going to have you guys do is turn to the person next to you and tell them a good story. Something good that happened to you over the last week. Could be personal, could be professional, could be somewhere in between. But give them a story. Really tell the story in all of its details, all the stories. The sights, the sounds, the taste, the smell. Help them transport themselves into your story. And then after 2 minutes, and you're not going to talk. As the coach, you don't talk at all. The only thing you're allowed to say is if they stop talking before I tell you to switch, you can say, tell me more. That is it. No hijacking. You are really just listening. So for 2 whole minutes, you can tell your story. Then I'm going to have you switch, and then another person will tell their story. Does anybody not have a person next to them? Very cool in there. All right. All right, I'm going to have you guys switch. Everybody switch. All right. So, any brave souls up there want to share what that was like? How that felt? Either to tell your story or hear the story? Made you feel happy. And did it make you feel happy telling your story, sharing your story, both?
It's much more hearing the story.
And what happened as you heard your story? What happened?
I kind of put myself in the place of share their joy.
I love it. Connection, empathy, sharing. And now, along those lines, who here told a story that they haven't told anybody else yet? What's that all about? Who here told a story differently than they've told it to anybody else, like more detailed? So, I'd be willing to bet that if you bumped into these people in the elevator or the hall, oh, how's it going? Oh, good, oh, I'm behind, oh, I gotta run this thing, oh, I got this other thing. We like regularly just gift our crummy days with each other. I don't think at all about wasting somebody's time, but then we like create this crazy bar for sharing nice things, thinking, oh, what do they care? Or I don't want to waste their time. Or they have a million other things to think about. What do they care about my kid's birthday party or whatever you were talking about? But you realize it makes you feel good. It connects you. And this whole idea of like loneliness in the workplace is a big thing. That we are around people all day long, but rarely get to actually talk to people. So I would encourage you guys to share the good stuff, because now you all know it actually is a gift that goes both ways and helps you actually re-experience your own. And the data would show that say you were to start a practice meeting like this, it would most likely be a much different environment, much more efficient, much more creative. If you're pitching a new concept or asking people to brainstorm with you, you're going to get a lot more mental flexibility than if you just went, all right, so here we go. We're going to start working on this thing that nobody wants to do, but we have to do. And it's a very, very different story. So thinking about coaching, the meat of it is this idea of really listening to understand the person, really listening for them. What are they saying that they don't even realize? What's behind their words? Reflecting back what you're hearing, reflecting back the strengths, the motivations, the values, the different dilemmas that they might be weighing, and really allowing them to be heard, but then peel back the layers of what they're talking about. You know, say they're working on a project. Why does this mean so much to them? Why is it important to them? Say they're talking about wanting to get home for dinner more nights a week. What does that mean to you? What does that mean to the people at home? And thinking about, oh, I want to be better about managing my in basket. What's really about? What is that all about? Let's peel back some layers and start to get to the root of why this is on your mind. And the idea with coaching is that the person you're coaching does most of the talking. You have to do very little as a coach other than listen, reflect, and ask these powerful questions that really help them find the next step and think about where they want to be going to. And so these powerful questions are really not our why questions, which is what we're so good at asking as doctors. Why is your blood pressure not controlled? Why aren't you coming to your appointment? Why are you in heart failure? Why is your A1C too high? But actually thinking, what would it look like if this were really going well? How might you ask for help? What do you think the first step forward is? How might you achieve that? What would this look like if your intern year was perfect? If you just knocked it out of the park? How would you start working towards those goals? You're really helping people visualize the future as if they were already successful. And then thinking back, all right, so if that's where we're going, now let's think about how to get there. And so a lot of this, if you remember nothing else, just remembering these handouts, say big and wide, thinking whatever you approach, think about it in the future as if you've done it, and it was a success. And then think to the current day. And a lot of times people will be like, well, is that even fair? Isn't that cool to make people dream really big if they're never going to get there? And the idea is that you're certainly going to get a heck of a lot farther if you dream big than if you stay safe. And so the idea is that you're really pushing that growth edge and thinking about it from a different vantage point. And a lot of this boils down, there's a model called the GROW model. But the whole point of the GROW model is that rather than just jumping into right where you are now, actually thinking about where do we want to be? What does this goal look like? So to give you an example, we were redesigning our ambulatory curriculum. And instead of saying all right, here's a lecture, here's our structure, here's the speaker, here's what we want to do, we said, if we had a year from now met and said, this is the curriculum, nobody ever wants to miss a lecture. Everybody wants to be there. This is the best part of their day. What would we have done? What would that look like? And we boiled it down. We talked to the residents. What would the perfect curriculum look like? And I said, time and money, no options. Just what would it look like if it were perfect? And then where are we now? And if we're moving towards that, what are the different things we could do? What are our options? How can we think about moving towards this goal? And so it was a completely different approach. And the best part of all of it was getting the feedback surveys at the end of the year and saying, this is my favorite part of the week because I know everybody's going to be there, and it's my chance to connect with other people in the class. And we were like, we did it. This is the thing nobody wanted to miss. And obviously, there's always room for improvement. But the other idea with coaching is to get off this delayed gratification treadmill and this idea that one of these days we'll be happy. You keep working hard, you get into a good med school. You get into a good med school, you get into a good residency. You work your butt off here, you'll get a good fellowship or job. And then at some point, you'll have everything you want, and then you'll be happy. And that is not ever going to work. Because I'm sure you all know people who seemingly have everything and are totally miserable. And so this concept that if you define what happiness looks like for you, you'll know how to get there. And when you get there, it's not like the goalpost will keep moving. You'll be there and can appreciate it. And when you do that, when you're truly happy, you'll be the most successful version of yourself. And so really changing that and flipping that so that success won't make you happy, but happiness will make you the most successful version of you. And the important thing is that a lot of us don't actually know what that means at work. What does workplace happiness, joy in practice, professional fulfillment, what does that look like? And there's a model that the positive psychologists have outlined, which is called the PERMA model, which basically outlines 5 pillars of happiness. And the P is positive emotion. What makes you feel good? E is engagement. What could you do all day that you could just completely lose track of time? R is relationships. What are the relationships that really matter to you? That no matter how much you give, you get back so much more in return. M is meaning. What really matters to you? What means the most to you about your work? What is the purpose behind everything that you do? And A is accomplishment. What are the accomplishments that you're most proud of? Not your boss, not your parents, your family, but you. And when you can define these things, then you can actually identify what will make you happy, what will make you fulfilled. When you're doing things, when you do this and you're like, yeah, I got this, I'm doing all these things. Then how are you doing that? Let's figure out how you're keeping that up. If you're not, and you recognize the gap, then thinking all right, so what are the resources? How can we connect you with them? How can we we get you back into a seat? And so this is like a great diagnostic algorithm. When I have a faculty member or resident who's just fried, walking them through these steps and thinking, like, what's the piece that's missing for you? How can we actually identify what is that missing piece for your happiness? And then how can we ask for it? And a lot of this boils down to just understanding what are the different factors that play for you. We all have a tank. There are things that fill our tank, and there are things that drain our tank. There are things that simultaneously fill and drain our tank. There are times our tank is connected to other tanks. My husband will be like, the more you travel, the more full your tank is, the less full my tank is. As I'm home with our two children. And so there's always times that we're connected to other people and what's going on in their tank. And it's one thing to know what these factors are. It's another to know what your gauge is. And it's yet another to know what to do about it if you're starting to be drained. And being drained can be short-term and can be long-term. And a lot of times with physician burnout, it's not the short-term drainage that's the problem. You know, that's like post-fall drainage. But it's really the long-term drainage when you haven't had those things that fill your tank time and time again. And when it boils back down to figuring out what's missing when you run through this equation. And they've done this really cool research project out at the University of Washington. And what they did is they took a bunch of residents and they said, have you ever been burnt out before? Yes or no? Self-identified. The ones that said yes, they then gave them a burnout inventory. And if they were still burnt out when they did this, they were excluded from the study. And probably given some resources. I'm sure they weren't like, sorry, you're burnt out, you can't participate. The ones that were no longer burnt out, they interviewed them. And they said, what worked? What helped you? And from there, they identified two types of burnout. There's circumstantial burnout, like, I'm just exhausted, this is really hard, I kind of lost my way a little bit, I'm a little fried. And with that, time off, connection with some resources, some support, some mentorship, getting involved in cool projects, stuff like that helps. Then there's more the existential burnout. Is this right for me? Did I choose the right path? I'm not sure I belong here. What is my role here? And that's when you need some deeper assistance. And what's helpful is even figuring out where do you fall in the framework, and then how do we help you? And so this has been hugely helpful in just like naming the pathways and figuring it out, and then thinking how can we actually act to help people fill that tank back up and get them back into that fulfilled engagement and professional satisfaction vision of well-being. So to give you a little bit of a run through, I'm just going to quickly glance at the time just to make sure. Okay. About what we've done, what we've learned about the coaching program, what our model is, which is very similar to what you guys have been doing here in the last year. The idea is we take teaching faculty from who volunteers, and we now have over 300 coaches around all of MGH. But in medicine, we have about 100 coaches. And we pair them one-on-one with residents. And actually, coaches tend to have 2 to 3 coaches per coach now. And we mismatch them to their career interests. So if you're a cardiologist, your coachee would not be headed towards a career in cardiology, probably not pulmonary either, just in case they do that like weird crossover thing that a lot of people do. And so we mismatch it so that you're never going to see your coach at an interview or at an important rotation or looking to them for mentorship. So that your coach is totally a safe space where you can really reflect, really process, say whatever's on your mind. And the coaches go through 2 hours of training a year with me. They have session guides, they have training videos that help brush up their skills. And our coaches have access to their residents' evaluations so that they can really help the residents check their own self-assessment against what is actually coming up and think about how they want to work on that, how they're gauging, how they're doing. And then they meet quarterly. And those conversations are protected like HIPAA, which is the easiest way for us to explain it. Unless you're worried about their safety or the safety of their patients, that conversation stays within you guys. There's no reporting back to the residency program. There's no evaluations that they have to fill out or any other expectations of them. And so what happens in these coaching meetings is typically starts out with a quick pulse check. How are things going? How am I finding you? And the reason why we don't just jump right into, give me a good story, is like you just never know. You know, what if they just like broke up with their fiance? And they're like, give me a good story. And they're like, how did this go on? And so the idea is like quick, like how am I finding you? What's going on? And then, you know, agenda setting, just like a primary care visit. You know, what are we going to help you first talk about today? And then, but first, give me a good story. And so with that, you really get those creative juices flowing. They're focused. They kind of detox from wherever it is you've gotten them from. because usually they're coming from a call or somewhere and they're like all friendly. And then each meeting is linked with a positive psychology exercise that the coaches get training in, and that's usually the next thing that you do. And then you end with what is the 10 out of 10 for the year. If this year was perfect, what would that look like? And you keep revising that throughout the year as you realize, like, wow, I'm like reaching this stage. I can probably move my bar a little bit higher and a little bit higher. And then what do you want to do between now and the next time I see you? So that you're constantly looking at the big picture goals as well as the short-term goals. And in the 3 years, there's basically, each year starts with a vision of what success looks like, as well as, and then the subsequent years reflecting back on the progress as you go along. And the first year is a lot about coping with stress, resilience, and not to say, again, that you don't have it, but making sure you know what it looks like so that when you need it, it's at your fingertips. And the second year, thinking about coping with stress and uncertainty, your perseverance, a lot of things about leadership, working with teams, goal setting throughout each year. And then in the third year, which is actually my favorite year, is really authentic leadership development, where you think about you've spent now over 2 years becoming the mental health doctor. But you were like a person and an individual before this whole thing started. And so merging those back together, merging that professional with the person that you were all along and figuring out how to take that forward with you as your next step. And so what we've learned so far, there's over 3,000 coaching meetings at MGH since we've started. Now we're entering into our 8th year. And our residents are in this. This is now a part of the culture. And like our program director's like, how's it going with your coach? The firm chiefs ask about how it's going with the coach. When they're dealing with something, it's usually the coach that they reach out to. Our faculty, when they're involved, they stay with them. We've only had maybe 1 or 2 coaches that would quit the program before. I've had coaches even leave MGH, like go across town to another teaching hospital, and still come back and meet with their coachees because they didn't want to leave them. And they meet, most of them are meeting regularly as expected. And in our first year, goal setting increased 3 times from baseline to end of year, and emotional exhaustion decreased. And then we continued studying it throughout the years, and we found there's like not large fonts. So basically, all those p-values are very significant. And red is that are people who fully participated, 3 or more meetings a year. And blue are people that only partially participated. And these are all different types of coping skills. And basically, the more you show up, the more you report that your coping skills, because the stressors that residents typically face are intact. And similarly, the better your relationship with the coach. So blue is that you have a good, excellent quality of communication. Red is a good quality of communication, and then the green is fair or poor. And so the more that you report a good quality of communication with your coach, the better you report your coping skills. And so showing up is part of it, and having a good relationship with your coach is part of it as well. And so we really invest in the communication training for the coaches to be able to reach this. So these are just a few examples. And then how this is all exploded is basically we're continuing to look at the impact on the residents, but also on the coaches themselves, and what is it doing for faculty well-being. And I will tell you the prelim data is fascinating. And so what we've seen is our faculty burnout in general has gone up like everyone else's has. Our coaches have flatlined. So I first got the data back, and I was like, oh, there's no change in burnout for the coaches. And then I was like, oh, there's no change in burnout. That's actually a good thing. Everyone else's burnout is getting worse. But then that really prompted us to start thinking about, like, okay, so what else? If burnout's flatlining, what is happening? What's happening with their coping skills? What's happening with their engagement? What's happening with their professional satisfaction? How else are they using these skills? And over 80% of our coaches are saying they're using skills with patients and families and friends and other learners and colleagues, really starting to get at this institutional wraparound of what happens when you teach a ton of people these skills and they start to use them. We've built a multi-site study. We now have 6 sites next year, or within the next 2 years, it's going to be 10 sites. And then have currently an internal randomized control trial of surgical-based residency, so surgery, oral maxillofacial urology, and OBGYN, as well as medicine fellows, looking at half of them get a coach and half of them get whatever their program has done for them. And we're following them over time to see the difference between the 2 groups and their outcomes. As well as pediatrics, interns, and fellows. And so there's all different arms of this, like this big amoeba that is growing. And it's exciting what we're learning, and what we've really started exploring is what's behind the curtain of burnout, and like actually not even really looking as much at the burnout data and more about what's happening. we have a multivariate analysis going, looking at like what are the different drivers of well-being. And so to put all this together, so there's the National Academy of Medicine who created this whole basically consensus approach to clinician well-being, so encompassing not just physicians but also nurses and allied health professionals. And what they put all this together with, of course, the patient at the center, the relationships, the clinician well-being, and then all these other factors that have to do with the regulators and the payers and the organizations, the learning environment, and then the individual physician skills, their roles, their own personal factors. There's so much happening that impacts the well-being of ourselves and our patients. And what the awareness is now that this is starting to be much more than just you should be more resilient, but actually thinking about how do we get to the heart of what really matters and to be able to exercise that as in our roles as physicians. And they've actually studied this and looked at the outcomes, quality of care outcomes, patient satisfaction outcomes, medical errors, and physician turnover. And they've actually studied the return on investment. And it's really fascinating if you see what it costs for a burned out doctor to be in your institution and what it costs when that person leaves. And the cost of physician turnover being probably more than 3 times their salary. And so the conversation of can we afford to pay for physician burnout and change our environment in which we practice, we can't afford not to anymore. And that if you boil down and you did like a post-mortem on all the physicians who left your institution and thought about why are they leaving, what's driving this, it gets down to things like, I felt like I wasn't valued. I felt like my voice wasn't heard or respected. I felt like I was asking to do more than what a physician should have to do. And these are the things that this cost saving. And they actually calculate, if you put $1 million on the table for physician well-being, you'll get 1.2 back in return. And that is probably an underestimate. Because a lot of this is looking at data that's a few years old. And looking at, like if you do it, when you look at burnout studies, for every 1 point increase in burnout or decrease in satisfaction, there's an up to 50% increased likelihood that they'll reduce their work effort in the next few years. And that their academic productivity will decrease by 15%. So their grants and other leadership roles. So this is something we can't afford to not pay attention to anymore. And the IHI put together a framework for how do we start to address this? What do we really do? And if you go from the top down, you think about improvement science and actually piloting and testing things, a commitment to the systems approach, thinking about impediments to joy and work. But at the start of all this, it's just walking around and saying to people, what matters to you? What's getting in the way of that? How can we change things? We're committed to helping this. And we're going to do what we need to do to make that happen, and we're going to invest in that process. But it all gets down to really that, if we get back to that PERMA picture, what matters to you? What gives you joy? What gives you meaning? What's getting in the way? And so what I would recommend from here, for you guys to see, there's parts of this that you're like, well, this sounds great and all, but we're not doing that right now. And so what you can do right now is start to use some of these skills to connect with other people. Start to think for yourself, if somebody walked up to you and said, what matters to you, what would you say back? And if they said, what's getting in the way of that, what would your answer be? How might you start to address this? And I'd say on your teams, in the learning environment, in your offices, instead of sharing our pain, share the good stuff. Now when I'm on service, we start every round with a good story from the night before. The post-call person gets to share a good story from the night before. And it really changes the tone. We do things like they get to pick a theme song that represents the last 24 hours, and we play it when rounds are over. Some interesting choices. But doing things like this that it doesn't take a lot of time. But what it means is in that investment and the value that you place in that individual and the camaraderie. I would think about as you approach some of these challenges, as you approach fixing this, start to think about what would this look like if we were successful? How can we achieve this? And then rewind forward to where you are today. And start to ask yourselves and others those what and how questions and really empower yourself to think through these challenges in a different way. So hopefully we addressed a lot of this. But what I'd love to do is be able to entertain, we have a few minutes to be able to entertain any questions that you guys might have. Thank you for your attention already. Okay.
So I think this is an incredibly important topic and something that we do not do well here at all. And I think one of the biggest problems that I see is a lack of work-life balance. And I think we all have this second work that we have to do.
And then the third shift is finishing your notes after you're done with your first two shifts.
So how, and that leaves no time for relationships or for, you know, to really have meaning in life. So I'm curious if Massachusetts General Hospital has done anything about that, and how do you address it?
Yeah, so that is the right question to be asking, because saying like, yeah, we need all these things, and if you feel like you're powerless within that structure and the confines of that, then what good is that information? So a lot of things we've started to do in primary care, we've shifted to a panel-based compensation as opposed to RVU-based compensation, which allows us to extend our patient visit length, and we're paid not for who walks through the door, but how we manage our panel, which means I now have the power to be like, I can just call you instead of dragging you in, or I can have even better, my nurse call you, rather than being like, I have to bring in the whole hypertension patient twice a year and make sure it's all in there. We've invested in a lot of patient advocate and population health people to do a lot of the work that was happening within the visits and making sure we were meeting all these guidelines. A lot of that is happening outside the visit and being inputted into the chart for us. They're doing things like analyzing the OR schedule to figure out how can we figure out a schedule that supports people so that they're not having to work at the extremes of the day, or to have a way that they can have some control or some voice over when they start and stop. We're in the earlier processes, or we're starting to make change. Well, we spend a lot of time figuring out what would that even look like if we were to change it, and talking to people about what are the problems. Epic, are you guys Epic?
Yeah.
Epic's a lot of people's problems, but it's not all the problems. And it's really not your guys' problem. You guys couldn't care less. Epic, Burner, who cares? Like, technology is not your problem. But technology might be this side of the problem more. And so thinking about, like, what is it about technology that would help? Looking at who's up all night writing notes, and what's going on in their practice, and how can we right-size staffing, and even change our expectations. I was in a meeting the other day, and someone was like, I just had one more MA. I just need twice as many patients. And I was like, or you can spend twice as much time with the patients that you have, and actually feel good about it, and not just be like, go. And so trying to really think about what is it that what do we need to be doing to support our patient population, and then what do we need to be doing to support our clinicians. But it is complex, but it starts with asking those hard questions about, what do we value and how do we support our docs.
Just to put in a plug, for those that I haven't met, I'm Christy Alexander from Family Medicine, and Doug was so kind to invite me. So at any rate, we just this week at the Church Council have decided to have a burnout prevention committee. And so we just want participation kind of across the board, because we're really looking at this as not just how do we make you more resilient, but the flip side of it as what do we do on that prevention side. So for those who are interested, please reach out to me, because we really want it to be a cross-section of lots of different folks, so we can really start attacking this in the way that you say, let's look at that end. The other piece too is on family medicine rounds, we do something very similar. We do the 1 to 2 a day. And we don't start rounds until the whole team sits together and says, what's your one good thing over those past 24 hours? And we try to encourage it to be not just a patient being like, oh my God, that person discharged, she was here for 3 weeks. But like that work they're doing is actually here, and you hear a lot of that from the interns. And then over time it evolves into, I got out early enough that I got to exercise last night, or I had time with my spouse last night that I didn't expect to have. And it really evolves over time. And it's been a total game changer, because instead of like dragging through rounds, we now are energized by the good, and rounds tend to be much more efficient and effective.
I love that.
And I think I caught you guys instead of saying. I'm so sorry.
This guy over here. Yeah.
So I actually like the fact about when you mentioned organizational culture. How long did it take at MGH for not only faculty but even residents to start taking this thing seriously and to be integrated into the program?
So we started the coaching program about 8 years ago, and I would say, and that was like the first thing we really did in a meaningful way about well-being. And what we now have a well-being portfolio, but it's taken us probably the last 3 years to come up with that and to then really engage the residents in that. And to really help them start to answer that question of what matters to them. That would really help. But it's really been in the last year appointed an APD for well-being. And prior to that, the year before that, started a well-being subcommittee of the residency. So the last 3 years is when really the energy started happening, which is also around the time that the real culture change for the coaching within the residency program happened. All of it was very solidified a year ago. As some people may know, we lost 2 of our residents suddenly, and the coaches and everybody just rallied around the residents and supported, and all internally, it really brought us all together in a way that it was very clear what matters to us and how much each other matters to us. And that, I think, was a very solidifying experience. And just seeing, in particular, like with all the political climate and different terrible things happening in and outside of our country, anytime our program director sends out an email, it's like, if you need to talk to someone, your chiefs, your coaches, your preceptors, your advisors, we're all here for you, and it's always like a part of that email. And so I think that's really when that change started happening, probably within the last 3 years. And then institutionally, within the last year and a half.
What kind of problems did you find in the interactions between the residents and their coaches, or the people in the really large, where the interaction didn't seem to be ideal? Was that something that could be fixed, or was it wrong chemistry?
It's a great question. Typically the wrong chemistry, and that not all masters are in heaven. And what we found is that sometimes the coaches were forcing their curriculum, like today we're supposed to do exercise. And it's like, can I just talk about my last rotation? and so we were like, it's a guide. It is not the Bible. Like, just roll with it. So we did a lot, like in response to the field, we've done a lot of coaching training, and a lot of like resetting expectations. But a lot of times it's like, I don't really need to coach. Anytime a resident is like, I don't want my coach, we just switch. No questions asked.
I noticed you're the Harvard Catalyst, so how does the CCSD embrace this program, or happen?
CCSD.
CCSD, NIH is like the Harvard Catalyst, did they embrace this program?
By my response, the answer is no, but I don't know what that is. The response across Harvard is that, so it's been very interesting. So the response among the residency community and the DME community in Harvard has been very welcoming. In fact, they're like, each week I feel like another residency within the local community is reaching out. Harvard Medical School hasn't totally figured out what they want to do with this yet. About twice a year they ask me to come and talk to them, and then we still haven't figured it out yet. We've also in their defense have like completely redesigned their whole curriculum in the last 2 years. So they're still trying to figure out what this looks like for medical students. And then faculty is just getting started. But I was mentioning to Dave earlier that Harvard has like a Center for Happiness, which is doing a lot of these studies, and they've recently reached out. And so I think that we're just getting there.
So it's 105, 103, so clearly nobody liked it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Before flight, so if you want to make her late, people are doing forever, come on every session.
Thank you very much.
Well, there you go.